Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the NAACP Newark, New Jersey Community Mass Meeting. We are delighted that you have decided to join us this evening. Please tell those that could not join us that this recording will be uploaded to YouTube on tomorrow at the Newark NAACP YouTube channel. So we're going to just dive in. We have a lot to share with you. I would like to turn the program over to our Civic Engagement Co-Chairperson, Debra Chandler. As soon as you unmute yourself, you can begin.
Okay, sorry about that. Good evening. On behalf of the Civic Engagement Committee and my co-chair, Ali McBride, we are so pleased to welcome you to tonight's virtual community mass meeting, Defending Our Democracy Beyond the Ballot Box. In 19 days, on Tuesday, November 2nd, New Jersey voters will elect our governor and lieutenant governor. All of the 40 seats in the Senate and the 80 seats in the Assembly, which comprise our state legislature, are up. Also, there are local elections in various counties and municipalities throughout the state. And on our ballot this year are 2 public questions that speak to amendments to our state constitution. There should be no doubt in our minds that while federal elections set policy for the nation, our local elections determine how the actions coming out of the nation's capital directly impact our lives, our family lives, and the well-being of our community. It is so important that we are, as responsible and responsive citizens, take the time to become informed and gain the civic knowledge that is needed to effectively exert our collective influence at the local level. For this reason, we are here this evening. When planning tonight's forum, we were inspired to invoke the spirit and intent of the community mass meeting, which in our continued struggle for social justice here in America was used as far back as 1830 with the convening of the inaugural National Colored Convention at Philadelphia's Mother Bethel AME Church, and continues to this day. Based on my very, very limited research, 138 years ago, on October 22nd, 1883, Frederick Douglass spoke at a civil rights mass meeting, which was prompted by a Supreme Court ruling at the time that much of the Civil Rights Act of 1875 was unconstitutional. The struggle still continues, y'all. The University of Maryland's Elizabeth Ellis Miller's 2016 dissertation entitled Faithful Genres, Rhetorics of the Civil Rights Mass Meeting examined how mass meetings served as the space to draw people into the movement, encourage people toward further activism, and to testify to anyone watching that the African-American community was working towards desegregation, voting rights, and racial equality. In Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, through these meetings, we were able to generate the power and depth, which finally galvanized the entire Negro community. That is the basis of our intent tonight. We are fortunate to present to you a distinguished panel of speakers who will frame out the task before us, leading up to the November general election and beyond. It is our goal that you will leave this session either reminded or informed, inspired and motivated for us to remain committed to civic engagement and for others to join the ranks. Civic Engagement Committee Co-Chair Ali McBride will serve as moderator for tonight's conversation, followed by closing remarks from our branch president, Debra Smith-Gregory. Before I turn it over to my esteemed civic engagement partner, Ali, I'd like to just read briefly his bio. Ali is a recently retired senior investigator from the New Jersey Department of Corrections Special Investigations Division, with 10 of those years with the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, serving as a task force officer. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a Master's of Administrative Science with a concentration in International Studies and Global Administration from Fairleigh Dickinson University, where he was afforded the opportunity to study abroad at Roxton College in London and the University of Mendoza in Argentina. He has volunteered with the Haiti Support Project in Milo, Haiti, and has traveled the world extensively. It's my pleasure to present to you our moderator for the evening, Ali McBride.
Good evening, and thank you, Debra. And I want to say thank you to everyone that's participating, because me, Debra, and our honorable president, we've been working like Beyonce has been surfing, all right? Just to kind of take away the seriousness of this thing, all right? It's so serious, we're so serious. I'm going to read the biography of each person before I engage with them, as opposed to reading them all at the same time. So we're going to start with Michael Strom. Michael is the program director for Leadership Newark, as he has stated to us earlier, established in 1998. Leadership Newark's vision and mission is to develop the skills and knowledge of a diverse network of community and civic leaders dedicated to enhance and strengthen the vibrancy and growth of the greater Newark region. Michael is also a member of Leadership Newark's Public Policy Fellowship class of 2015. Michael earned his master's degree in political science from Rutgers, Newark, with a focus on structural solutions to systemic challenges. His bachelor's degree, also in political science, is from the College of New Jersey, where he served as the student trustee of the board. As an educator, Michael has experience teaching American government at Union County College, with Teach for America, and leading teen social justice programming at Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. Michael also served as a Leadership for Educational Equality Public Policy Fellow, class of 2019, and a Bonner AmeriCorps Community Leader in 2009. Michael is passionate about leveraging technology to promote equitable learning, personal fulfillment, and access to opportunities, especially in a post-COVID-19 environment. Michael is a firm believer in the power of connections to facilitate change, and is working to develop a virtual simulated society to foster collective problem solving. Welcome, Mr. Strom. What we'll do is we're gonna, good. We're gonna start with the first question. And the first question is basically, briefly give us an outline, right, of all of the branches in the state of New Jersey. Just a basic briefing of all of the branches of New Jersey.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Ali. I'm sorry?
Of New Jersey government, I'm sorry. I should
no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so one of the really useful things to think about when you think of the New Jersey government is how similar it is to the federal government. There are a great number of similarities, far more than there are differences when you think about the general structure. And the reason why I bring that up is that when you think about the different checks and balances that there are for the federal government, the same principles in theory apply to the New Jersey government. So we have a governor that's pretty similar to the presidency. And just like the presidency, that's one of the only position that is elected by the entire state of New Jersey. There's not that red tape of the Electoral College the way there is in the federal, but it's the same sort of structure there, where that is the only one office that is elected by the entire state. Then you have the Supreme Court of New Jersey, similar to the Supreme Court of the United States. And you have a bicameral legislature, just like you have in the national government. And why this is important is you have different types of individuals in different types of bodies. So you have that one at the top, then you have a few people in the Supreme Court. You have much more that are representative in the State House. And then theoretically, at least, you have the entire population, which are supposed to be providing their general input and helping to guide policy as a democracy.
So constitutionally, and we've discussed this over the months, constitutionally, looking back when the Constitution was developed, what position would the governor hold per se? If we're talking in real time, what position would he hold and compared to when it was first brought into existence?
Yeah, so if you think about the types of governments that were around at the time, the governor is pretty similar to a king. It's the monarchy role. You have a lot of similarities and parallels, but virtually an elected person at the head of the helm. You can think of that as a monarchy. When you go one step down, you got oligarchy, then you have republic, and then you have democracy. All of those were built into the different features, but the governor sits at the head of all of that.
Got you.
So when you think of different power dynamics, which I know we're going to get to in a moment, a lot of the issues that you think of when you think of a presidency and the amount of power that's appropriate for a president to have, a lot of those similar discussions and similar debates you can also have when thinking about the governor.
Right. So let's just say, for instance, dealing with this pandemic, right? And being that we were hit just as hard as New York, kind of expound on the powers that we may have allowed during that time with a governor being in that position. And that's important considering that, like Debra talked about earlier, that we're going into an election and the types of power that a governor would have.
Yeah, so it's important to pinpoint before getting into that before the pandemic, before that even happened, New Jersey is considered to have the most powerful governor in the entire nation, as far as the role, not necessarily the person per se, but as far as the role and the powers bestowed upon the governor, they are considered to have the most powerful elected branch. And I'll send some information about why that is and the different powers that the governor holds that other governors in other states do not hold. But then when you compound upon that and add to that the fact that essentially for the past, I've lost track of how many months it is, but for the past year and a half, we have been in a state of high alert where every day you are looking to the governor to see if there's any new information. I cannot personally think of another time where there has been that much attention and that much focus on a single body and a single branch. And it has been basically unrelenting. And we were talking about this earlier today. When you think of other states, they experience waves. New Jersey, we've sort of felt as though we've been in one continuous wave because of our population, because of our proximity to New York and Philadelphia. We have always been in a state of high alert. And so basically for the past ever so many months, we have been providing a strong amount of special pandemic powers to the governorship. And that is something that if you think about it in terms of the federal government, if you were to provide emergency powers to a federal office for that long, a presidency, you start to think about, hey, are there potential problems in the checks and balances? Right. And I know one great parallel that we brought up earlier was FDR. At the time, really responding to major challenges in World War II, but then quickly being seen as an example of potential abuses of presidential powers. I'm in no way saying that that's the case with Murphy. I'm just speaking from a theoretical point that when you provide a great deal of power to a single office for an extended period of time, right, that can often lead to growth beyond the extremes that individuals are comfortable with.
Absolutely. As we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to go to the next one, but thank you. But that also kind of brings into mind the California governor and the checks and balances that they recently utilized with him, where someone came out the blue and was able to run against them. But we might be able to touch a little more on that later on. I'm going to go to the next person. Thanks, Mike. The next person on our panel is my honorable president of the Alpha Alpha Lambda fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity chapter of Alpha Alpha fraternity, Dele Oladapo. I'll read you his bio. President Oladapo is the president of the Alpha Phi Alpha Lambda chapter in Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, 19, better known as the Brick City Alphas. The chapter's national program are Go to High School, Go to College, A Voteless People is a Hopeless People, and Projected Alpha. Oladapo earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Polytechnic University and an MBA from Columbia University. Oladapo serves as the chief operating officer of the Biz Grow Partners, a private investment management firm. In his role as COO, board management and capital raising are his primary responsibilities. Currently, Oladapo manages 4 portfolio businesses on the Biz Grow platform with a total of 30 million in revenue. That might have something to do with that Yoruba last name coming into wealth. I did my research, dear President. Prior to his role as BGP COO, Oladapo was a technology professional with roles that include C-suite leadership at Prudential Financial. I want to welcome President Oladapo. How are you?
Good evening.
Good, good. Our first question to you is the history of the fraternity and its involvement in the voting rights movement, most notably, as stated, the Voteless People are a Hopeless People initiative founded during the 1930s.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be on such an august panel. Alpha Phi Alpha has a rich history of community impact from our founding in 1906, around the time of the Niagara movement, which was, of course, no coincidence. Our purpose has been to be, first of all, servants of all and to transcend all. The rich history of the fraternity is exhibited in the fact that we have programs such as the Voteless People or Hopeless People, which are one of our national programs, which continues to this day. Within Alpha Alpha Lambda, which is a chapter based in Newark, New Jersey, and founded in 1926, we have our own local program on Voteless People as a Hopeless People. We focused since 2016 on running at least 2 programs per year. We're proud of the fact that we've been able to get 150 new registered voters, and we've been as creative as possible, handing out voter registration cards and paperwork at community events, fundraising events, and social service events. When I was in college and I came into the fraternity, I had the opportunity to see the first Black mayor and the only Black mayor in New York City's history, at least to date, in New York City's history, Alpha legend David Dinkins, Honorable David Dinkins. So the impact that we have in the community has to be not only in what we do within the community, but the opportunity to be in the local government, be in the national government. Seeing our sorority sister of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Kamala Harris, in the White House gives me great pride to see my daughter being able to see that the notion of voting is not just an act that goes into Never Never Land, but in fact, an act that really brings you into the forefront of the reality. Being able to have a voice in shaping the laws, being able to have a voice and how we show up within the laws and within the government is key. Things don't always go as we expect, but I must admit, I didn't think in my lifetime that I would have seen a Black president. And when Barack Obama was elected not to 1, but to 2 terms, it was proof positive that our vote does count, our thoughts do matter, but we need to take action and we need to participate.
That's a great segue into the next question. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do we respond collectively to the resistance from our community that voting is a waste of time, even though there has been an uptick in Black voter participation in recent years, as you also stated as well? How do we kind of push back on that notion that our votes are it's useless? What are some of the ways, and like the programs you mentioned, but if there's anything else you want to add?
I think you have to look at the leadership that we have within Newark itself with another famous alpha, our mayor of Newark, the Honorable Raz J. Baraka. We're in public office today. The only way that happens is with our vote. At the end of the day, sometimes we can be apathetic about the system because of injustices that we may have experienced, but we do need to remember that so many people made sacrifices, in some cases of their very lives, just so that we can have the privilege to vote. The only way that we can ensure that those sacrifices are not made in vain is by taking action. Voting is an extremely important part of our civic duty. It gives us a chance to participate directly in the process, and it gives us a chance to recognize that without that vote, we really are just complaining as opposed to having thoughts that can have action.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was going to go into the beyond the ballot box and how to remain engaged. How do we remain engaged? Like, we have had an uptick, and right now we have some valleys. We've had some peaks, but we have some valleys. What are some of the ways you think, and you can kind of think about this too if you have anything to add now, but if you can, how do we deal with those valleys that we're currently going through right now? There are a lot of people that feel kind of disjointed about the process, about participating in the process, and now some of the things that they push for are not really being addressed. What are some of the things you think? How can we stay engaged, basically?
I think forums just like this are a key part of it. We have to have the dialogue. It's in these forums that we get the education. We have to make sure that we go to the proper sources, whether it be the NAACP, whether it be local churches, whether it be schools. Your teacher in your classroom is giving you the guidance. Your pastor at church is giving you the guidance. It's important that we have this dialogue and we take action against that dialogue. Community service, I think, is a key component of it, because you do need to be engaged in driving help for the community. This Sunday, I had the opportunity to see one of our chapter brothers, Reverend Pat Council, provide a sermon on resiliency and on purpose. But on a bi-weekly basis, he's providing food and he's providing clothing to the citizens of Newark, but he's also a councilman. So we participate in the normal walks of life, but then we also participate in public service. But that public service can't happen if we don't also receive votes from the citizens within that particular county or ward. We have brothers like Do It All Dupree Kelly who are running for councilman. So it's just so important that we continue the dialogue, and we have to recognize that public service does not mean that you have to give up maybe your ambitions of being a doctor or a lawyer or a sports athlete. I think they can be one and the same, but I think the dialogue, such as the session tonight, is a key component of how we stay engaged, even when it's not one of the big election nights.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully you didn't give away any ambition, Brother Pat Council, because he's not a councilman yet. So hopefully you didn't give away any ambition that he may have of that position, but we'll go more into that when we come to the question answer period. Thank you, Brother Oladapo. We're going to go to our next panelist, Miss Linda McDonald Carter, another friend of mine. In September of this year, Linda McDonald Carter has retired from her position as associate professor and director of the paralegal studies program at Essex County College after serving 32 years. During her tenure, Linda created the PLS Writing Mentorship Program, led the successful college-wide effort for certification of the program by the American Bar Association Standing Committee of Paralegals, served as assistant to the president, director of Board of Trustees, Affairs, and Staff Attorney to the college. Linda earned her bachelor's degree in political science from Rutgers University, Newark, and her Juris Doctorate from Rutgers Law School. Linda's professional association membership includes the Association of Black Women Lawyers of New Jersey, the New Jersey State Bar Association, New Jersey Bar Association of Paralegals, and the New Jersey State Supreme Court Fee Arbitration Committee. Linda is a vocal and ardent advocate for civic education. We would like to welcome Ms. Linda McDonald Carter. And with the first question, if you could, Ms. McDonald Carter.
Oh boy, here we go.
She said, here you go. Explain the differences, if any, between civic engagement and civic activism and its value.
All right, first of all, I'm going to start with a quote from Frank Zappa that really captures the conditions that we're in right now. First of all, his quote is, civics was a class that used to be required before you could graduate from high school. You were taught what was in the United States Constitution. Remember, before you could graduate from high school. And after all the student rebellions in the 1960s, civics was banished from the student curriculum and was replaced by something called social studies. Here we live in a country that has a fabulous constitution and all these guarantees, a contract between the citizens and the government. Nobody knows what's in it though. And so if you don't know what your rights are, how can you stand up for them? And furthermore, if you don't know what's in the document, the United States Constitution, how can you care if someone is shredding it right before you? So I think that, I wanted to start with that quote. In terms of civic engagement.
Hey, Linda, who was that quote from again? You said it, I didn't catch you.
Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa, got it.
Zappa, right.
Okay.
Right. Who, very civic-minded person. All right, civic engagement. Civic engagement is like reform. It's addressing the issues of public concern and political and non-political active work to basically show and let people know what their duties and responsibilities are as citizens as it relates to government. Civic activism is about transformation. It's about changing systems. It's about encouraging greater citizenship so that you have involvement in actual public policy and decision-making. It's where you may have demonstrations. People write letters to the press. You tell your story rather than having corporate media tell the stories for you. It's essential to ensure that public institutions function in a transparent manner with participation and representation for all. It requires, civic activism requires, it's the best way to put it, citizens are watchdogs of government. So when you get to the other questions, I'll tell you what it means to be a watchdog and what you need. But I'll tell you that where there's a strong and civic culture of political engagement and participation in those countries, the individuals are more likely to have a more effective government when it comes to servicing the people, delivering services to people. It reduces corruption and it provides faster and more equitable economic growth. When you have a citizenship that is, or a civic citizenry that is engaged in activism and not just engagement. Particularly engagement is just voting.
Right.
That's just voting. But civic activism requires, and I'm going to take this from Bob Law because I think this is really important. Civic activism is not just to vote to say that I voted, because people have worked really hard and died for us to do it. But when you're voting for someone, you want to vote for an elected official that is well-informed, able to articulate strategies, resulting in change conditions of the people. Change conditions. If they're homeless, so that they're not homeless. Strategies that will attack the root causes, not smooth over the conditions of people. You want to vote for people where it's consistency, an elected official with a proven track record in social justice and advocacy for the people. An elected official that believes in something greater than themselves. An elected official that demonstrates a willingness to surround him or herself with a competent, principled, committed people, not just people in politics, friends and family, and people who worked on a campaign, but talented, committed people that represent the good that we in our communities want to see. An elected official that's courageous and resilient. Remember, leadership is a sacred trust, right? And that's what we have to understand. It's a sacred trust. Martin was a leader, Malcolm was a leader, In terms of politician, I always tell people, if you want to understand and have a baseline of what you should expect from an elected official, look at Adam Clayton Powell and look at Shirley Chisholm. Those are your models for what you should expect from an elected official. How do you get them? Not plain civic engagement, but civic activism. There's a big difference between reform means keep the status quo. The status quo is not working for us. As Americans, not even Black people, as Americans, reform is not working.
Right.
You need transformation to change people's circumstances. So when you talk about civic engagement and civic activism, one is like reform. We're just keeping the status quo. That doesn't change people's circumstances. Civic activism is about changing people's circumstances, making this the country that, you know, particularly people of African ancestry who have made this country the democracy that it is today, is because they've been involved through our history in civic activism, even not necessarily knowing it or being second-class citizens.
Let's go off script for a second. And I think we got time. I'm looking at the time. And you mentioned Adam Clayton Powell, right? Why do you think that Adam Clayton Powell deserves to be in that esteemed list of leaders?
Because he was the one elected official in the 20th century willing to die for his people. And as a result, they supported him because he supported them. He was the most powerful elected official in the history of the United States because he controlled the money, right? And he was powerful because he took care of his people. He understood the trust that he had in his people. He took care of them, they took care of him. I don't know many elected officials willing to die for their constituents. That was something he was willing to do. He put himself, whatever people think about him, I encourage you to do your own research so that you have a model of what you should expect from an elected official. If they're not at that level, that means there's some work you have to do as a watchdog, and that's what the people are. And we forget, it's about the power of the people. It's not power. Government is not designed to, government is designed to serve us. We're not supposed to serve it. And in order to do that, we need to understand, have the models. And you know, in terms of the other questions, I know there's some other questions coming, so I'll leave my answers for those. But Adam Clayton Powell.
You have one other question, and the reason why I brought that up, and that was part of it, absolutely. But I asked that mainly because, and I'm just a moderator, but we know that when Adam Clayton Powell served as congressman, he probably wrote more legislation than any other.
Exactly, he moved than any other elected official in the history of the United States.
Right. And that's why I had to. You mentioned it, I had to go in. Plus, he's an alpha man, but I had to mention that. And your next question, and we're going to make that one because we got good time, but we want to keep the flow going. But discuss critical thinking and civic engagement.
Okay, so I talked about civic engagement is basically reform. However, critical thinking is important. So critical thinking basically means it's objective analysis and evaluation of the issue in order to form a judgment. It's among the first causes, though, of change, but is a pariah in the school systems for no other reason than it conditions the mind to have suspect of the form, function, and everything it sees, including everything in the classroom being taught. So when you talk about critical thinking, you talk about school systems in particular, but you talk about analysis. But what I wanted to add to that, you can't have critical thinking if you don't understand the language of government and politics. So you need to understand the language. So when we talk about how do you sustain awareness of how do you get people engaged, they need to know what the language is. Most people, and I've been teaching American government for 20 years. Most people don't know what elected officials are talking about. They don't know that abatement and subsidies mean that taxpayers got to pick up the costs when you give other people, developers, abatements and subsidies. They don't understand that. So the first thing, if you want to have sustained awareness, is to make sure that people have the language of government and politics so they know what people are talking. Because normally, if somebody's speaking Farsi, you don't have a clue what they're saying if you don't know what Farsi is. Most people don't know the language. They don't know the phrases. They don't know the words. They don't know the terms of government and they don't teach that in school. But that's something that, I'm looking at everybody at the table that you could be doing in your own place, a fraternity, a sorority, civic group, the churches. We need to know the language. And I've already done the work for you. As a professor at Essex County College, who was a coordinator for political science for 20 years, I've already put a list of words that every American in this country should know, understand, and include in their vocabulary. So they understand what politicians are saying and what government officials are saying, so you can be the watchdog to make sure that they're accountable to you, the American public. So you don't even have to do it. You can add some words to it. So it's already done.
Got you. Thank you, Linda. And we're going to explore some more of that during the question answer period. And last but not least on our panel is Kimberly Holmes, Esquire. Kimberly Holmes serves as the co-chair of the Social Action Committee for the North Jersey Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She serves as the chapter's chaplain and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority's Eastern Regional Chaplains Council and National Chaplains Council. Kimberly earned her bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in concentration in public administration and paralegal studies from Montclair State University. She furthered her education by receiving her Juris Doctorate from Seton Hall University School of Law. Kimberly also earned a Master's of Divinity and a Doctorate in Ministry from Drew University. Kimberly currently serves as the Chief of Staff for the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, where she reports to Lieutenant Governor Sheila Y. Oliver. Kimberly has served as a municipal prosecutor to the city of East Orange, for the city of East Orange, and as an assistant prosecutor, section chief for the Bias Crimes and Community Relations Unit of the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office. Kimberly served as the Chief of Staff for the Division of Rate Counsel, R-A-T-E Council, and as an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Newark. She was a member of the Essex County Bar Association and an attorney member of the New Jersey State Supreme Court Fee Arbitration Committee. Kimberly also served as an attorney member of the State Supreme Court Ethics Committee to District 5A. I want to welcome Ms. Kimberly Holmes. Good evening.
Good
Ms.
evening,
Holmes.
sir. Good evening.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Our first question to you is, well, actually, if you could, talk about the sorority's founding and history of involvement in the voting rights movement, specifically the 1913 Women's Suffrage March in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much, Brother Ali. And I consider it an honor and a privilege to serve with everyone that's on this panel. I've been sitting, listening, and gleaning from them, and I'm hoping that we can learn from one another. And in answer to your question, I just want to lift up a quote that was by Nanny Helen Burroughs. And she wrote this quote in August of 1915 in The Crisis, which we know was the magazine for the NAACP. And she said, when Black women get the vote, it will find her in a tower of strength, of which poets have never sung, orators have never spoken, and scholars have never written. So for me, the foundation with Delta Sigma Theta and women is with pitbull tenacity. You cannot give up. And in terms of the history of our sorority, in March 3rd, 1913, it was like 6 weeks after we were founded, several of the Delta Sigma Theta, several of our founders marched in the historic suffrage march under Delta Sigma Theta banner. So that was our first sorority's public act. Today, when you think about what was happening back then and how low voter turnout it happens, we still have to continue the fight. There's a saying in Swahili, it says, a luta continua. Our struggle does continue. And with Delta Sigma Theta, we believe in partnering. Since that time with, our founders, Bertha Pitts Campbell, Osceola McCarthy Adams, and Vashti Turley Murphy, they were the pioneers that powered political activism, especially with women. We carry that banner even to today by partnering with like-minded organizations such as Alpha Phi Alpha and the others of the Divine Nine. We sponsor voter registration. We combat voter suppression. And we talked about that in our social action meeting recently. It's one thing to get people to get out to vote, but Linda so eloquently talked about it. What are we voting for? Some people don't even understand how to use the ballot box. And if you don't even understand how to go into the place and how to vote, what are we voting for? What are we holding people accountable for? So with Delta Sigma Theta, We believe in educating people on voter suppression and getting out the vote. We also believe in the issues that impact why we vote, such as affordable health care, such as financial literacy and economic empowerment, political awareness and involvement, gender equality, and racial profiling, because those are prevalent issues that, you know, people come around when it's time for election and they maybe sing a song and dance to us. But after we vote, after November 2nd, then what happens? So with Delta Sigma Theta, as with other members of the Divine Nine, we want to hold people accountable. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We all have founders, and we were intimately involved in the suffrage movement. But also separate from that, where do we go from here? So to me, I just want to impart on people that your voice matters.
That's right.
That collaboration counts, and that our vote counts. Some people don't vote in an off year. They won't vote at all. They think their vote doesn't count. Your voice counts. Your vote matters, and collaboration is so critical. And I believe in holding people accountable, no matter who they are, up the chain, down the chain. Hold people accountable, and don't be afraid to ask the questions when we talk about voting, because that's what our founders did, and we owe it to them to do the same.
Absolutely. Next, maybe you can expound on your organization's advocacy for partnership opportunities to mobilize. You kind of touched on that, and empower Black voters' participation in every election, especially midterm and local elections.
In terms of partnering, I think it's important to dig a little bit deeper. I'm gonna put my notes to the side. I think it's important to dig deeper, because sometimes you want to partner with people based on who they can get to come out. But I think it's deeper. I think we need to look at, what does that partnership mean? What is going to be required of me? What's going to be required of you? And how we're going to hold people accountable? Because sometimes in a partnership, it may not be 50-50. It may be 60-40. Whatever the numerical outcome may be, I think it's important to lay out what our expectations are. Delta Sigma Theta has partnered with the Divine Nine, but we also partner with other organizations that are not a part of the Divine Nine, but are a part of our mission. We partnered with Community Food Bank. We partnered with a new organization that I brought up. It's called We Act for Environmental Justice, because environmental justice is an issue for us as African Americans, but yet we don't see it as an issue. So I think sometimes in partnership and collaboration, we have to look at what that organization stands for, what has been their proven track record. Is it more rhetoric, or is it work? Or are they relevant? Because sometimes organizations might be a little bit out of touch, and you may find yourself partnering with someone where it's an unequal balance, or where your mission is not accomplished through that partnership. What are the goals? What are the expectations? And what is the follow-up? So Delta Sigma Theta has partnered with various organizations to fulfill its mission, but also to help fulfill the mission of that particular organization. Now, I don't know, did you want me to talk about the boards and all of that, or do you want me to wait? It's up to you.
I do want you to go into that, because right after you answer this, because I'm going to skip the last one, because I think that it's important, and I apologize if I seem a little selfish, but I think that it's something for all of us to consider. But the history of New Jersey citizen boards and commissions, and a need for more Black representation and policy and decision making at the table. But also, I don't know if you can kind of combine it. If not, we'll put that into the question answer period to discuss opportunities and basic qualifications needed, right? Because I think it's literally one question. You know, how do we get our people more engaged in that process, knowing how to serve on those boards? Because there are other things to serve on outside of running for an elected position, and then the qualifications needed for that.
You're absolutely right. In terms of serving on boards, I can just tell you about some of the opportunities that have been afforded to me through working with our dynamic Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver. And when you go into that room, sometimes there are people there that don't look like you. Just because someone does not look like you does not mean that they're your adversary. And sometimes, I'm going to keep it 100 with you. I'm going to keep it stacked. Sometimes people that look like you are not about what you're about. So for me, yes, some boards require you to have experience in certain things. For example, I serve on the iBank. That board deals with money, and it deals with dollars being appropriated to towns, and to towns where it's important for us to be on those boards so we can provide a voice for. It's a lot of funding out there. Why not have some of those funds go for improving the roadways in major cities? So some boards, you do have to have specific qualifications. Some boards, and you should have those qualifications. And there's nothing wrong with them requiring that we have those specific qualifications. The way that you research these things, you go onto the website for the state of New Jersey. When you go onto that website, you look up the governor's office, Governor Phil Murphy. When you click onto there, it will have boards and commissions. So before you decide that you would like to be considered, I think it's prudent upon the person to do the research to find out what does that board do. Like I serve on the Meadowlands Conservation Trust Board. I found myself in a boat traveling up the Meadowlands, looking at bald eagles to see how that impacts our environment. And at first I was like, wait, what? But it helps and it's necessary. But just like I did that also on the Human Relations Council, that's another board or commission that deals with rights and making sure our voice is heard in various communities. So for me, I think it's important to know what you're looking for, do your research. It's also important to network. That's how you get on these boards a lot of times, through networking. Attend the city council meetings, attend the board meetings to see what it is that the person is actually doing. And it's also important to understand parliamentary procedures, because when you're on the boards, you have to move motions and you have to vote. And you can't just go up there and say, yes, no, I move that. You got to understand the language, because language is important. And you also have to understand, you also have to be okay with if you're the only person in the room that has a mohawk. You got to be okay with that. And you got to go in there like, I deserve to be here. My voice matters. I was appointed to be here by the lieutenant governor, so I'm going to be here. And when you come in with not cockiness, but confidence, and you have to do your homework. For every board, they will send you what's called a board packet. And you have to review that information before the meeting, because you need to be informed of what you're voting about. Because sometimes we're voting on millions of dollars. So you need to stay up and read the material before you attend the meeting. And when the chair says, can I have a motion? Don't just sit there like a rock with eyes. Move the motion. And when they ask for a second, and if you have questions about a particular thing while you're serving on the board, ask the questions. Don't just go along to get along. And sometimes you might be the lone dissenter, but just like in our nation's history, sometimes the dissenting opinion in one case becomes the opinion, the majority opinion in the next case. So to serve on these boards and commissions, I say network, I say understand what the qualifications are, I say do your homework, do the research, and once you get on that board, you owe it to yourself to read the minutes. And that seems so elementary, Ali, but a lot of people don't read the minutes before the meeting.
Absolutely not. Yeah. I know.
So those are, and also don't be afraid to talk to people and ask them, Kim, tell me about how it is to serve on this board. Give me your opinion. Is this something I should do? And, so research, educate yourself, understand parliamentary procedures, understand the ability of networking, and smile sometimes when you're talking to people. So those are some things that I would say. There's so many boards and commissions that do not have us there. And we bring an added necessary value to these boards and commissions. So I would say, write a letter, put your resume together. And if your resume is not tight, talk to someone to help you get it tight, because they review these things.
Right.
So those are just some of my takeaways that I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate that. We're going to go to questions. A lot of people had some questions, but I wanted to use the bully pulpit of moderator for a second, and I wanted to bring the president of Alpha Lambda back in. I wanted to ask him a question because he's humble. He's a humble guy, and I just want to put something out there. It's not actually a criticism, but it's just a matter of recognizing what he's done. I really just got really more involved with our chapter again, mainly because of the fact that they were a little more active, that they participated in the process more. And even before, and he may not know that, but even before he ran for the president, I hope I'm not giving up too much. People were like, that's our man. And there have been a lot of things. There have been a lot of connections to the community. And I just want to ask you to expound on that. And that might give us some ideas about how we can get people more engaged in the process, the same way you did when you came and you became the president of the Alpha Alpha Lambda chapter of Alpha Alpha Fraternity.
Thank you for that, Brother McBride. And I have to echo the great comments from Dr. Holmes. It really is about making sure that every time you get a chance to be at school or at work, there are always additional opportunities. And oftentimes we kind of maybe think, well, I don't want to do more work, but it's in that extra 5% and 7% of work that you get the greatest learning, that you get the greatest chance for networking, and you have the greatest opportunity for impact. In the 24 years that I had the chance to be an executive at Prudential, one of my greatest prideful moments was to be the chair of the Black Leadership Forum, which is a business resource group which focuses on the African-American professional development of those employees. I was amazed that we even had an organization like that at a Fortune 500 firm, where not only is it important to recognize the diversity of the employees that we have, but it's also important to lift those resources up, give them a voice that they don't necessarily have. Through the BLF, I received mentorship, and again, to the great point of Dr. Holmes, from people who are white, from women, from Black people. You start to realize that God will bless you, but you cannot dictate what packaging that blessing will come in. I had the opportunity to be a leader in that organization. I had the opportunity to be mentored and to be a mentor. It made me recognize that when I was in college, I took the initiative to be in organizations like National Society of Black Engineers, and I got the opportunity to pledge into Alpha Phi Alpha, yet I did not remain active within Alpha for many, many years. In 2012, I lost my mother, and that dramatically changed the course of my life. It had me redefine what it is to have legacy-based impact as opposed to an impact that's based upon materiality or successes that are fleeting. And I was lost for a number of years, and I got reclaimed into the fold by the great brother Mark Smith. And I reignited my focus on others rather than myself. And it brought me out of the darkness of my own misery when I was able to see that there were things going on in my life where I could have impact, as well as my ability to get the support that I need from others that would lift me up. When the pandemic hit, like so many others, the darkness and the cloud of the pandemic froze me in my tracks for a number of weeks, maybe even a few months. But then it was in bonding together with the brothers of the chapter that we did things like initiate a weekly prayer call, which allowed us to have transparency and lean on each other in a way that never would have been the case. It made us recognize that even though we're leaders in the organization, we also need help too. And it was in that realization that we started to find our purpose to have impact on mankind. During the pandemic, it also became clear to me that the legacy that I wanted to have in this world was not based upon being able to be C-suite or be known for Ivy League. It really is the purpose of what have you done for others? Being able to exit out of corporate with a wealth of knowledge and resources and network really only is purposeful if I can impact the community in which I live. Being a second-term president of this chapter is one of my most proud activities. There are times when you think to yourself, I don't have the time to do that. What else would you be doing with your life if it's not to impact others around you? So these things allow you to have balance on your own personal challenges. These things allow you to understand that you can have impact, but it's not going to be an easy fight. We do Project Alpha work with different schools around Newark. There are so many schools that we can't possibly get to all of them. But the reality is that we can change the life and the trajectory of even one single child, then we have done the work that God has called us to do. Because you don't know if you're talking to the person who's going to cure cancer. You don't know if you're talking to the person that will bring balance to racial injustice. You don't know if you're talking to an entrepreneur that will have resources that are so abundant that they can redirect it and give balance to the underserved. So you have to be purposeful. You have to recognize that in this purpose to have benefit for others, you will meet the right type of people who will lift you up when you're in your darkest days as well.
That's
so
right.
the chapter has been robust. We've been doing a lot of different work, but it starts off with us taking care of each other so that we have the resources to take care of others.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. What I'm going to do now, I want to pose a question to Michael, and then I want to the first question from the people to go to Linda, so everybody can get kind of some equal airtime. Not that everybody wants airtime, but just to kind of give some balance. Okay. Mike, we talked earlier about the power of the vote. And you said some very interesting things, very interesting. And I want you to share that a little bit with everyone. What we talked about, if you remember. You remember, Mike?
Yeah. So we had a very, very deep conversation, but I'll try to point out some of the main takeaways. One of the things that makes this election so interesting is that it's a quote unquote off-year election. New Jersey is one of the only states which has its governor election on an off year, on an odd year. And so the number of people who are already coming out to vote are low. And then if you think about it, we already had primaries for that election as well, which are even lower as far as turnout is concerned. When you couple with that the fact that in this country we utilize something called a first past the post election system, what that basically means is that whoever gets the most votes in a given election is the winner. It sounds like a commonplace idea because that's what we've come to think of as elections, but there are many other types of elections. You don't necessarily have to have an election system where you only vote for one person. That's just what we choose in America to do for most of our elections. We saw in New York that there was, for the first time, utilizing a ranked choice voting system.
Exactly.
And you end up with a situation, for instance, with the Republican Party, the current nominee was actually not elected by more than 50% of the people who came out to vote for him in the Republican primary. And I bring that up not to say anything about him as a candidate, but just to say that that is the system that we're in currently, where you can have individuals that get elected by a smaller than normal amount. You can end up with people who get into positions without more than even 50% of the vote. And that's both empowering and discouraging, depending on which side of the coin you want to look at it. Because on the one hand, it means that your vote matters a lot.
That's right.
But on the other hand, it does mean that people have the potential to get into power who may not have the interests of the entire constituency at heart because they were brought into power by a smaller group.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you, Mike. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open this up to the public, and we're going to ask the question posed by Matthew Robinson. And this is going to be for you, Linda. And just to let everybody know, Linda is one of the people that I go to when I want to just take my shirt tail out and really get in the mud and talk about what's real when it comes to the political process. So Mr. Matthew Robinson asked the question, in this current political climate, is the civic watchdog approach still effective? Can't hear you, Linda.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, you heard the question?
Okay, I heard the question. And answer this question, yes, it is. And people don't realize the power they have. So I have something called the Empowerment Toolbox, the Civic Empowerment Toolbox. So I'll just give that to you so that everybody knows, and it's available. Debra will have it, she can put it on chat, whatever. But basically, the first thing in the toolbox is that we need to talk to people. And when you talk to people, you realize that you may be similarly situated with them. And when you find people similarly situated, that means you can come with solutions that give you a lot of power so you can change your circumstances. So that's one thing. The second thing is understand, which I talked about before, the language of government and politics. So you understand what people are saying about you. 3, I would suggest to you to know the difference between press, journalism, investigative journalism, public versus public relations, marketing, advertising, and media. Realize that the role of the press and the reason why it's in the Constitution, because its job is to educate the American public so they know when government is not acting on their behalf. Marketing or public relations, all of that is designed to get you to buy things. They're really different. People use those terms interchangeably, but they mean something totally different. The other thing is know Civics 101, which I talk about how to make elected officials accountable. Read and understand the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the US Constitution. Carry the Constitution with you with a library card so people know you know how to read. Get to know, I talked about Adam Clayton Powell, that if you know him, you have an idea of what you should expect from any elected official. Shirley Chisholm, know about Fannie Lou Hamer, because for most Black folks, if it wasn't for her, you wouldn't be voting in the first place, especially in the Democratic Party. Learn how to, if you don't know, you can go to Google for this. Writing letters to your politicians, writing opinions to the local newspapers. And then there's a degree of importance in terms of writing phone calls, form letters, emails, hard petitions, internet. Letters are really important. Vote in every election, as the gentleman said, I think Mark said earlier, but just don't vote to vote. Make sure that you have the, I went through a whole list, I won't go through that before, but the other thing, understand who's actually funding that campaign. You have to know who's funding that campaign. And there's a source I can get you.
Follow money.
Yeah, I thought I had it. But anyway, the other, just quickly, the other, I just said, research the source of elected officials' funding so you know who they're accountable to. You want to be accountable to you, the American public, not to somebody else. Spend your money and make your purchases in the order and based on the commitments of that person to benefit and sustain your culture and your community. Watch movies that inform when the media or education institutions will not or cannot. There's several documentaries out here. Music is really important. Some of you know, I hear people complain about young people in music. They talk about the music being bastardized and co-opted and sterilized. The music of the 60s and 70s was actually, the legacy of that music was to help you be a citizen, for you to understand what your role was here in the country. I cannot stress that enough. The music is so important in the 60s. Remember, I'm going back to the Reverend Kimberly, Dr. Kimberly, and what she talked about in environment. Marvin Gaye was talking about the environment in 1973, right? Think about the Black music that's led this country through the Civil Rights Movement, through the Black Power movement, through the Chicano movement, through the Puerto Rican movement. It was the music, not the music of today necessarily, the underground music, but it was the music. And that's one of the reasons why the music has been weaponized and bastardized against young people so that they don't rise up. The music is really important. The other thing is with us, watch documentaries, and movies. Don't poo-poo movies. There are a lot of movies out there from the 60s and 70s where people were sending messages. And if you watch them, you get to learn a whole bunch of stuff about what your power is. The other thing, just in terms of language, let me just add this. When we stop saying power to the people, and for those of you who are under 50, you probably never quite heard that. But those of us like Debra and Debra, people used to say power to the people. What that meant is that the people, the government is supposed to serve us. But we stop using that language. When you stop using that language, it's not in your head. When it's not in your head, you don't think about it. So I can't, these things basically, as Adam Clayton Powell talked about, what's in your hand. These are things we all have. We have so much power as citizens, we have no clue, right? We're waiting for somebody to lead us and tell us what to do. No, remember, most of the people who profess to be elected officials are not necessarily leaders. Again, they're not necessarily leaders. But if you think so, then you may get a little confused. So you need to understand what a leader is. You need to understand what language people are speaking about, what they're saying about you, how they're managing you, and you're not managing them. And so I can't stress enough that you understand that we have so much power, and it comes in the form of civics, right? It's there. Why do you think they took civics out of school systems, particularly in the urban areas first? I will tell you, look at the curriculums of wealthy school districts, whether it's private or public. They are learning civics in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. I'll just say this and I'll leave, going back to the gentleman's question. The reason why you have the first Black this or the first Spanish speaking this is because in the segregated South, those teachers who could not teach in other schools, who had masters and PhDs and bachelors, right? They were teaching 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds who later migrated to the urban areas. Right. And they came, even though they may not have had more than an 8th grade education, those teachers taught them civics when they couldn't even be second-class citizens. And
That's
those
right.
same people who came through the, you go, Allie. Those same people who came through the Great Migration with that knowledge were really the foundation for the first Black this, the first Black that, first Spanish this, the first that, because of those teachers in the segregated South. So, I just say that it's important for you to learn your history. History should inspire you to want to do things, but understand the power you have in your hand. And basically, it's just talking to one another. Don't rely on social media for everything. Social media is supposed to be a tool. It's not supposed to control you.
That's right.
Right? You manage it. It does not manage you. And that's my answer to his question.
Okay. I have a question. I want to just throw out to anybody that wants to answer it. Please do so. But I wanted to throw something at Kimberly. But before I throw this question at Kimberly, just to kind of give everybody an idea, what Linda kind of talked about when we talk about the migratory patterns of African Americans, particularly that came from the South and came up north, kind of piggyback on what you said. This is a good reference right here. She said that not to kind of rely on social media, and we need to kind of exercise that brain muscle. This is The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. It came out a few years ago, and this came out maybe a couple of decades before that by Carter G. Woodson. Not the miseducation of the Negro, but the mind of the Negro, a reflection of letters and letters during the crisis. He also talked about migratory patterns. So he talks about how we came from the South, we came up north, and we were educated. So many of us were educated due to what happened. Kimberly, I wanted to ask you, with all of the positions that are available for these citizen boards and commissions, and I'm only thinking in terms of, and I'm being objective, I'm thinking in terms of all the positions that the last president that was elected, that there were so many positions that he didn't fill. And it was mainly because his administration might have been a little inept, being nice. And so, were there positions, commission positions that are not filled? Are there civic, positions that are not filled? Did you see? Because I'm always thinking that whenever I think of these positions, I think that, one, I think are the right people in those positions. And then I think, are there positions that are not filled yet?
Yes, there's a lot of positions that are not filled. And the way that we find out about it is that a notice will come out to all of us in the state, and it'll say, Governor Murphy has appointed the following people to these positions, or sometimes situations may come up where task force will be created, like the situation with our sisters and brothers in Haiti. Then a task force will be created, and then there will need to be people on that task force. Like in Atlantic City, there was a working group, the Atlantic City Working Group, to address the issues in Atlantic City. Then there was a group that was created for issues in New Jersey dealing with the COVID. So sometimes situations will cause the creation of a task force or working group where members are needed to fulfill those positions. So I say, also, I didn't mention this before, but I want to mention it now, tap into those elected officials to let them know I'm interested in serving. Will you support me? Can I get a letter of support from you? Because a lot of times when the resumes come in and it comes in with support from someone else, an elected official who we vote for, that also kind of paves the way for the person to get on there. So yes, there are plenty of positions that are vacant. And also sometimes if you don't have quorum of a board, you can't effectuate matters. And that happened with the Civil Service Commission in the previous administration. And that's not a scathing indictment against former Governor Christie. Sometimes you put forth names and it doesn't get voted upon through our legislature sometimes. And if you don't have quorum on the board, you can't vote on matters. And Civil Service Commission matters are important because that's where people appeal wrongful terminations. That's where people appeal not getting promoted. That's where people appeal decisions that have been made on a departmental level. It gets appealed to Civil Service Commission. But if you don't have quorum on the board, then sometimes those matters are not heard and you wind up settling the case from what happened in the department level below or what happened at the OAL. So to answer your question, Ali, yes, there are plenty of vacant positions on these boards and there are new boards created all the time where they need people to serve. Send those resumes in.
Are the task force positions long-term, like the commission boards, not really the duration of whatever the task force is?
Well, it will say that in the legislation. Sometimes the legislature will create a board or commission and they'll put down what is required. And most of the time with these boards and commissions, especially if there's something that's created through legislation, the legislation will exactly spell out what is needed. A lot of times a report has to be done. So you're meeting for a specific purpose. So know if you get on that particular board, it may require you to meet monthly. It may require you to meet bi-weekly. You might be the one that has to draft something. So know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Like if you're a person who's a skilled writer, you may want to be on the board where you got to write reports. If you're a person that's a good orator, you may want to be on a board that deals with your strengths.
Got you. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
We have another question. I'm going to go to our chat because there was a question that was put up here. Hopefully my sound is a little better. Someone alerted me that my sound wasn't good. Hopefully it's better. There's a question and anybody can actually answer this if they have an idea or if they want to just make a comment about it. They said that 35,200 is the median household income in Newark. This is an emergency. What can be done to help Newark? And that question was posed by Muda El Amin.
I would say entrepreneurship is absolutely something that we always should consider. Ultimately, the path to wealth, the path to generational wealth will come quicker through entrepreneurship than through employment. Obviously, education is also key. Clearly, the more education you have and the more knowledge you have, access to resources gives you the ability to increase your income. There was a comment about networking. Network with people who have the resources that you seek, who are at a place that you would like to get to try to find out how they did it and the path that they've taken so that you too can achieve those levels of financial freedom.
Ali, if I can add to that one.
Yes, ma'am.
From a historical point of view, I just want to add that a lot of people don't think of Black people in terms of being entrepreneurs other than this new entrepreneur. But people need to understand historically, we had no choice. We were the entrepreneurs of America. So it's not new for us. And I think a lot of people see it as something that we need to get into when we survive by being entrepreneurs coming out of chattel slavery. So I just want to make sure people remember that there's a history of entrepreneurship. And I say that because a lot of times these programs, they never really talk about the history of entrepreneurship in the Black community before Tulsa. And I would also add that there were 200 self-sufficient Black communities in addition to Tulsa that many people don't know about that are documented. So if you want examples of entrepreneurships against the odds, right, then those would be examples that give you the inspiration and let you know that anything is possible if that's what you decide you want to do.
Absolutely. I think to really quick to that point, to Sister Linda and Brother Dele's point, and if anybody follows me, if you don't, Ali McBride on Facebook, and I'm Gully Black on Instagram. I posted something the day before yesterday where I talked about how there was a time after the '67 riots where we always asked, where's our little Africa? Where's our little Africa, right? Because we had Chinatown, because we had Little Italy. You can just take a cursory walk through Newark now, and I took a picture within 30 minutes of 10 businesses that have been created within the last few years to months by continental Africans, literally 10 pictures. So it's happening. It's happening, and people are utilizing them. At one time, African-American barbershops, that's all we had. Now you would have to pay somebody with blood to find a black barbershop, because you have a barbershop really dominated by Spanish speaking community that's coming over here, and they see the opportunity and they take advantage of the opportunity. So we have to kind of get back on that horse and be able to compete. That's a real thing, and entrepreneurship is a real thing. Let me see if I can
Ali,
find
can
it.
I just say,
Yes, ma'am.
I will also say research with New Jersey Economic Development Authority, EDA, because there's funds that are available for startup businesses. Also research New Jersey Redevelopment Authority under Leslie Anderson, who's also a soror, because she helps small businesses sustain funding, because a lot of it is about sustainability. A lot of it is about knowing how to use the computer to even apply for grants. A lot of times companies fell during the pandemic because they didn't know how to apply. They didn't know how to make the necessary pivot with the pandemic and how to use the computers. So I would say research. There are funds available to help you. I just mentioned EDA under Tim Sullivan and Ty Cooper, who's also from Newark, Leslie Anderson with the Redevelopment Authority, and also Department of Community Affairs under Sheila Oliver, our commissioner. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Dr.
Yes,
Holmes,
ma'am.
could you speak to if you know any of the opportunities under the cannabis, under the new cannabis law, particularly? Are
I'm
there
not
any
sure.
opportunities there?
I can find out for you and send you an email, because I'm
Well,
not sure about that.
That's okay. I
particular-
thought that might be something that the young man
It's-
might also be interested too, because I know there's supposed to be opportunities of equity in the communities. So maybe that's something he can look into.
Yeah.
I would also want to ask the participants who are watching, ask questions. I mean, the panel has been thorough. The panel has been thorough. Like, I that's my opinion. I say prove me wrong and ask some other questions if you can. Ask some other questions, because I can ask questions all day if y'all want me to. But I don't want to dominate the discussion. So if you got any questions, put it in the chat, and we can get to them. Because we're gonna stop at 8:30. We're gonna stop at 8:30. But if you have any questions, please feel free to add on. My president of our graduate chapter, he's gonna have to do a stop at 8:30, but I think we're gonna end at 8:30. But ask your questions.
Ali,
Because that's what. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make a quick comment. When
Yes.
Mark was talking, Michael, I'm sorry, I called him Mark. Michael, I'm sorry. I lived in California, and you were discussing the strength of the executive in New Jersey. I would just add that the other part is that, and California is a big state, Texas is a big state. People think they're very powerful governors, but they're not really.
Right.
One of the reasons why New Jersey governor is the most powerful is because of the jobs and contracts they can give out that is not available to governors around the country. So those contracts and jobs have a lot to do with the power of the governor. People write off New Jersey, the third smallest state. They think we're country bumpkins, but no, we're far from it. And I think people need to understand that the governor's power comes from who they can give contracts to, and who they can give jobs to, and who they can give appointments to. That's really important. And that's not necessarily the power that every governor has in the country.
Got you. Well, really quick, what I'm going to do is, if Mike had something to add to that, I'll let Mike add to it. But we're going to do a stop at 8:20, and then we're going to give everybody 2 minutes to give their closing remarks. So we're going to let President Dele go, because he's actually out of town and did Brother Solid. He did an album for Brother Solid, so I will want him online with me back in 489 at Alpha Omicron chapter, the mother chapter of the Carolinas of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So thank you, brother. So Mike, if you have anything to add to that, because I think Linda was kind of agreeing with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And Linda, I really wish I could have taken your class. I hope that you still have some recordings up there. I definitely want to hear them. I will definitely provide some links. I didn't want to get into the nuances, but one thing I would like to add and point out that's very interesting, and this was kind of inspired by Ali when we were talking about similarities or differences between the New Jersey government and the overall federal government. New Jersey has not had a governor that has not been a Republican or a Democrat since 1854. 1854 was the last time, or I'm sorry, that was when the Republican Party started, was 1854. Before then, the last person that had won was a Whig, another party that existed on the national level. So why I brought this up is that there is a lot of parallels and there's a lot of seep through from the top down that becomes very important, especially as this nation becomes more polarized and after what we've seen this past year and different ways that agendas can be seeping through from above to below. It's important to start thinking about how that could be affected on the state level, and that the states are not necessarily immune because there is this overarching theme that travels through, where the governor of New Jersey almost certainly will be a Republican or a Democrat. There's other people running for the election, but as we mentioned before, because of first past the post elections, they're probably not going to win because it hasn't happened in over 150 years.
Wow.
So just something to think about as another reason why this election is so important, because of the polarized climate that we're in today.
Absolutely. So we're going to close it out. We're going to have Dele give his closing statement, and we're going to give everybody 2 minutes to provide us with that.
Thank you, Brother McBride. And I don't think I'll need the 2 minutes. We talked about Adam Clayton Powell a number of times, one of my favorite politicians and one of my favorite Alpha brothers. So I thought I'd read 2 quotes from Adam Clayton Powell. The Black masses must demand and refuse to accept nothing less than the proportionate percentage of the political spoils, such as jobs, elected offices, and appointments. Only legislative, judicial, and executive action can completely guarantee the victory of the free world. Those words ring so true today as they did from the time that he said it. I always think about this notion of, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward, never any backward steps. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brother Oladapo, and I appreciate your presence. We're going to go to Mike. Brother Mike, what your closing statement, please?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I feel really blessed and humbled to be a part of this conversation today, and I would really love to have conversations with each and every one of you in the future. The last point that I would like to bring up, which kind of continues off of what I was just speaking about a moment ago, is just how important the election process is in general, because of what is gleaned from the election. There are a number of different elements that are kind of picked off of the election results that aren't necessarily always true, but that are expected because of the results. So one of the big things that comes from an election, people look at the demographics and they try to figure out what the public will was due to who voted for what and who voted where. There was only a couple of choices, but those choices are so powerful. and they can be used to justify a lot of different initiatives. They can be seen as a public mandate or an expression of the public will to go in one direction or another. And so, especially in an election where there may not be as great turnout as other elections, it's really, really important to express your vote.
Thank you, Michael. Truly appreciate it. And we're going to go to Ms. Kimberly Holmes. Your last statement, 2-minute statement.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, I just want to say thank you for having me here to serve with everyone. And, Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair.
Mhm.
So I think that we need to bring our own folding chair if we don't get a seat at the table. I
That's right.
also, in honor of you and of your chapter president, Reverend Dr. King said, we're all caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. And he said, what impacts one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. So what's going on with you, what's going on in America with voting and voter education and voter suppression, it might impact one community directly, but it also impacts me indirectly. So I thank you so much for having this community mass meeting, because we all brought different things to the table that impacts all of us in one way or another. And but let's not get in trouble. I just have to mention that in 1989, the National Social Action Commission instituted Delta Days at the nation's capital. So we do have Delta Days at the nation's capital. We also have in New Jersey. And in 2003, Delta Sigma Theta became a non-governmental organization at the United Nations. So I wanted to bring those things up, lest I get myself in trouble with my esteemed colleague and soror, Debra Chandler. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Truly appreciate it. And just to kind of piggyback on what you said, the quote you used with Dr. King, Queen Nzinga, when she went to negotiate in war against the Portuguese, they wouldn't offer her a seat. And one of her soldiers, a man, got on all fours so she can sit down on him. So you create your own space. You understand? All right.
I feel you. All right.
All right. So Linda, we're going to give you 2 minutes. we're going to give Linda her 2-minute closing statement, and then we're going to close this out with our esteemed president, Debra Smith-Gregory.
Oh, just real quick, as a quick note, and this is just for Michael, but for everybody, Black women and white women could vote in New Jersey in the 1700s. Just wanted you guys to know that. We're the first state that allowed women to vote. Then I'm going to close with 2 things. One is Frank Zappa again, civics and its connection to freedom. And the last with Teddy Pendergrass. So with regard to freedom, Frank Zappa, the illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery. They will pull back the curtains. They will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater. Frank Zappa, Teddy Pendergrass, wake up. Wake up, everybody. That's my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Linda. Truly appreciate it. And we're going to close out this event with our beautiful, esteemed president, Miss Debra Smith-Gregory.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to our panelists and our first community mass meeting. It was designed to give you information, the general public, to give you information, to inspire you, to encourage you. And I think that we accomplished that this evening. We hope that you've gained the information and that you share. This recording will be up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Newark NAACP is the channel. We hope that you subscribe. And it's our intention to have these discussions perhaps on a quarterly basis, but we don't want to have one once a year. We don't want to be episodic in this information that we're bringing you. Knowledge is power, and we need you to know as much as you possibly can so that you can make informed decisions about what happens to you and your family, your quality of life that you're living. We need everyone to get more information, to get more involved. I think it was Kimberly who said something about not complaining, because it's easy to complain and say what's not being done. It's easy to say what politician is not doing their job, but we have a responsibility. This is not just you vote someone in and you walk away and then you come back and you say, oh, you only come to see me every 4 years. Well, what are you doing in between that time? Are you doing your part? It's not a spectator sport. This is not. This is participatory. That means that the ball goes on both sides of the court. And that's how this game gets played. And so we just hope that you got this information. There are some links that were placed in the chat. Please understand that this is the first time in our state we have early voting this year from October 23rd to October 31st. There are 4 sites in Newark. We put the sites in the chat, and they're open from 10 to 8 p.m. It is recommended that you take your sample ballot with you, because there's a barcode that they will scan. And please pay attention to the new way to vote, because sometimes we get very complacent about how things are. And when something changes, we get annoyed and say, oh, I'm just not going to be bothered. We have to learn the new way to vote. It is a paper ballot. It is not pushing the levers like what we're used to. We need you to look at the ballot when it comes to your house, if it hasn't already, and to study it. And I heard repeatedly, research. Do your research by reading your ballot so that when you go vote, you are aware of what it is that you need to do. And finally, I just want to commend the co-chairs, Debra Chandler and Ali McBride, for just doing such a great job. They came up with this idea of us needing to inform our community and the history of mass meetings. And sometimes we discard things from the past because we don't think that they're effective. But based on this pandemic, based on our isolation from one another, we need to re-engage with each other. We need to refresh each other's minds, refresh each other's memories about how to be with one another. And that's within our family and within our community. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we look forward to hosting more of these events. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Dele. Thank you so much for this. We're getting a lot of good feedback. And like I said, we'll put it up tomorrow on our YouTube page. Good night, and be safe and be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings.
Good night. Goodbye.
Good night.
Good night.